You know Mario. Red hat, mustache, overalls. Plumber with impressive verticals who saves a princess. He's been around for a while. He's also an iconic video game character who's often responsible for breakthroughs in new and exciting gameplay. Super Mario Bros. Actually saved the entire industry single-handedly back in the day. Super Mario World introduced 16-bit gaming in a way that would move the industry past an arcade-like game design. Super Mario Galaxy blew the sky off level design, and Super Mario Odyssey reminded us that even small changes like Cappy can make an enormous difference in how we play. Of the influential Mario games out there though, only one was responsible for teaching other developers how to design gameplay, levels, and most importantly, the camera at the dawn of 3D gaming. That's right, Super Mario 64. Hello again, and welcome to another backlogged replay in Super Mario 64. Sadly, I never owned this game back on my N64, but I have since purchased it at least 4 separate times, and I've played it plenty. But if you do want an opportunity to roast me for classic games that I've never finished, there will be lots of opportunity for that, so make sure that you're subscribed. Super Mario 64 and I do go way back, regardless of my lack of ownership, and I more than understand its legacy in the realm of game design. But I would not call myself a hardcore fan of this game, and while I'm providing targets for internet hate, I also want to share that I played for a very specific reason this time around. I've heard before that Super Mario 64 may not be the best platformer on the N64, but rather Banjo-Kazooie might be better. Having recently played Banjo for the first time, I tend to agree with that sentiment overall, but instead of focusing on that for this video like I initially planned on, let's just celebrate a classic during a year filled with exciting news regarding gaming's reddest plumber. Let's go! We've already covered how Mario has been changing the course of gaming for decades, and Mario 64 is near the very top of influential games. While the PlayStation had been out for about a year and a half before the 64, and Mario with it, I'm not sure it had proved itself yet. Several classics had been released for PlayStation, but Nintendo was still the popular kid. In terms of third-person adventure titles, PlayStation only really had Crash Bandicoot and Resident Evil at this point. Resident Evil had very stiff controls and static camera angles to keep the scares scary. And Crash was pretty good, but had a few issues of camera angles causing critical jumps to be way more difficult. So here comes Nintendo with their cash cow, and they blew the pants off everybody with a freeform style camera control, full 3D levels with awesome design concepts, and the most fun Mario controls ever, with all kinds of fancy pants acrobatics and cool power-ups. Seriously, the idea of running through Peach's castle as a hub world to get to other levels while still playing the same as any other level was incredibly novel and made this world feel huge and wide open to play any way you want. Now again, I sadly never had this on my N64. To be fair, I was too young to buy my own games, and for some reason, I just never got this one. Seems very odd, I had almost every other Mario game that came out for the system, but not this one. No need to feel sad though, I distinctly remember renting it from Blockbuster many times, mostly messing around with my Game Shark to use Level Select and Limbo Hatless Mario. Yes, I thought it was funny. Next thing I remember, the DS came out with Super Mario 64 DS, and while I consider that one different enough to save for another day, I don't really remember owning that either. Probably more rentals. Now, the first version of Super Mario 64 I remember buying was the Wii Virtual Console version. Even considering that was more than 10 years after its original release, it still makes me feel so old thinking about that, since the 3DS and Wii U shops are shut down too. I spent so much money on downloads. Anyway, since then, I have bought it on Wii U, and now have the Switch Online, and Super Mario 3D All-Stars version. That last one being the one I played specifically for this video. Oh, and as far as story, Peach has cake for Mario. He shows up to an empty castle, commences to jump into paintings in search of Power Stars. Yeah, Mario's never been much for a compelling story, nor has it ever been needed. Bowser's pulling shenanigans, Mario's gonna throw him into a spike bomb. Eat for everyone, kids. It is worth noting that this is one of, if not the first time, Peach was called by her proper international name. It's pretty neat. I also want to give another shout out to Charles Martinet, the longtime voice of Mario, for greeting us with the voice we'd come to know and love for decades to come, and this game as his first truly official performance. Thanks for being a vocal video game icon, Mr. Martinet. I can't wait to see what comes next for you and Mario both. Also, quick plug, by the time this comes out, I'll have my first top 5 video out, and it's all about Martinet's Mario performances. So be sure to check that out, link in the description, and a little iCard. First time using one of those, I think. So yeah, check it out. I'd love to share with you. Alright, this is the part where I originally planned to do a lot of comparison to Banjo-Kazooie, but the short version is that we wouldn't have Banjo without Mario 64. It was specifically made to be the better game, and I think it is. Mario flew with his wing cap, so Banjo could soar with Kazooie. That's all I'm going to say about that, but you're welcome to discuss this civilly in the comments. Good luck. In terms of presentation, Mario is nearly unmatched. The Mushroom Kingdom and the lands surrounding it are always bright and beautiful and wholly unique. Platform games have long had a reputation for using the same general level themes, like the Lava World, Ice World, Water World, Desert World, and so on. This game ticks about every one of those boxes, but here's the thing, this game is why those things exist. Really, Mario's levels have been themed this way since the beginning, but you know, it's a 3D level now. There's a part of me that kinda thinks of this game's levels as generic, but I sometimes forget what a pioneer this game was. Even if they're a touch generic now and they think that's understating it, it's only because so many games came after that used Mario 64 as their inspiration. Plus, there's no getting around the fact that despite heavy MIDI sounds, this soundtrack is awesome. Bob on Battlefield, Bowser in the Dark World, the water level theme, all iconic. So when it comes to controls, I tend to prefer fast, precise, tightly tuned controls, generally speaking. While I still adore Kirby in the Forgotten Land, for example, I'd much rather it felt more like Super Mario Odyssey. Odyssey is my favorite Mario game of all time, maybe my favorite platformer, and a lot of that comes from a feeling of total control. I never felt like Mario was behaving in a way I didn't want him to, and it helped me pull off some really tricky stunts. Super Mario 64 feels like a near opposite. It still feels fast and precise. The level design often feels like you have to pick one of those two, mostly due to slippery controls. I gotta say, as much as people wanted to see more out of Super Mario 3D All-Stars, I feel like this is the best way to experience Mario 64 now. The buttons are mapped in a way that makes sense for the modern controller, and even though it's not 16:9 widescreen, the graphics got smoothed over in a way that still looks the same, but much cleaner. Anyway, Bob on Battlefield is easily my favorite place to run around in because I can blast through it at full speed with few worries. Every other level, even the really cool ones like Womp Fortress, Tick-Tock Clock, Rainbow Ride, and Tiny Huge Island, have a variety of areas where I had to take it slow and be extra careful, or the game would slam my face into a wall, metaphorically speaking, because of an instant death by bottomless pit. Is what I thought before. In reviewing games for this show, I'm learning more and more that my lack of patience and temper are really getting in my way. I'm not able to be totally fair all the time because I'm too busy being mad about cheap deaths. Seemingly random tangent here, try to keep up. This plan of mine to review games I already have footage for is really not working out for me. I've had to finish or just completely redo 2 of those games at this point, including this one. The plan for this series was to help manage my storage space, which is getting very slim with all these projects, and also to help me save time. Well, that's not happening. But I'm glad I'm doing this series anyway, because it's giving me a decent variety of games to talk about, but more importantly, I am learning so much. Point of all this is, even though I still remember the old gaming days of yore, I keep forgetting about the difference in how they're designed. See, the game is built, regardless of the era it's made in, to maximize enjoyment and to entice you to keep playing. Nowadays, games do that by building a world, a bunch of different systems to engage with the world, a premise to get you started, and then they turn you loose to run wild and do as you please. Take this year's likely contenders for Game of the Year, Tears of the Kingdom, Baldur's Gate 3, and Starfield for fine examples of these types of games. Hundreds of hours of personalized amusement each. That wasn't the draw when I was a kid. They just couldn't build games like that, even on PC. No, back then, it was all about the challenge. I was recently reminded of this after a playthrough of the first Sonic game over on my Let's Play channel. I'll put a link to that in the description. But basically, after a very frustrating time trying to finish, even with Sonic Origins Anniversary mode, Robotnik shows up with the emeralds you didn't get and says, "Try again." What a jerk. But let me tell you, as mad as I was about how that went down, I want another go. I'm making this part way longer than I meant to, but after I had to play through Mario 64 yet again for this video, I was struck by how much less frustrated I felt this time. Oh, don't kid yourself, the later levels are still very mean. I'm looking at you, Tiny Huge Island, you know what you did. But it didn't feel nearly as long or painful as it used to. That's what these games are about. You try and fail over and over, and after some practice, you can make it. Thankfully, Rainbow Ride, despite being wide open for falls, was a delightful little road to the end of the game, and the fight with Bowser. I even made some incredibly risky jumps. I did take this playthrough as an opportunity to 100% the game. Much of my frustration came down to slippery controls and bad camera angles that compounded what was already meant to be a challenge, like certain enemies. This does nothing to besmirch the name of Super Mario 64, an absolute classic and a critical stepping stone for 3D game design and 3D platformers. I had a lot of fun playing through this again, frustration and all. Clearly, I've done way too much thinking lately on my own gaming habits and how that affects my feelings about a game overall. I really hope that none of this comes across sounding like I don't like Super Mario 64, because I really do. I really, really do. Super Mario 64 and I have lots of memories together, and I enjoy it every time I play through it. I just get frustrated. It happens. I think what I might need to do is play through these games and then just give myself a little more distance from that playthrough before I really decide what I think about that game. I like this game a lot, but between the old graphics, the slippery controls, and the sometimes fussy camera, I think modern Mario fans would have a hard time revisiting this one. As a matter of fact, when I asked my nephew about it, he said that he tried it on his copy of Super Mario 3D All-Stars and didn't really spend a whole lot of time with it. But I still have fun playing it even today, and no amount of yelling is ever going to change that. So where does that leave things as far as a rating? What should you do with this game if it's still a part of your backlog? Well, that's up to you, of course, but I think it's appropriate to just play it as long as you're still having fun with it, even if you don't finish. I do think most of you would have the some sort of digital copy, probably Switch Online, but just in case you do have a physical copy of this lying around, you should keep it though, as a major part of gaming history. Hopefully, you can make sense of my emotional back and forth throughout this whole episode, and I'll see you again soon. Happy gaming! Thanks for watching another episode of Backlogged. I hope you're enjoying the show and some of the changes. I don't have any personal things going on anymore, so hopefully I can focus up for the next series of videos in which I'll be discussing games that came out this year in 2023, because there's been so many awesome games. I did try to avoid having two similar style videos in a row, but just couldn't time it out differently, so I'll just say it right now. The next episode is on Super Mario Bros. Wonder. I'll see you there.